So the world tab is the third one over here. It looks like a little globe, or a world, conveniently. How about that? So in this tab there is an environment light. We'll go ahead and check that, turn that on. This is like having the sky illuminate everything. I don't really do a physics lesson about how that stuff works, but...
So is that like a skylight?
That's a skylight.
Okay.
So we're going to do environment light. We'll also turn on ambient occlusion, which is like ambient shadows. Those are fancy soft shadows. You know that shadow that you see on a really cloudy day when you look down? It's a really big diffuse shadow, not being directly lit by anything. That's basically what ambient occlusion is going to do. So we turn those two guys on. I'm going to re-render this guy. And you notice right away that it should brighten up in here a little bit because now we have ambient light coming into our room. And it's removing some of the harsh shadows out here because the light basically is coming in and simulating it bouncing around a little bit. This is just a Blender internal. So you can see how big of a role lights play in making things look real. It's one thing that I've told my students is most of the advancements in 3D graphics in the last decade have been in the Department of Lighting. Recently there have been some other things there with animation systems have been about it. Facial capture and stuff like that has been really big in the last 3 to 5 years, especially now with Avatar and things like that. But if you take a look at like Toy Story 1 and some of the new stuff, they're using exactly the same technology. The only thing that has changed is the lighting engine. And basically how accurate it is. It uses real space lighting now. So maybe the only thing that I really don't like about this currently is that I have really harsh shadows or harsh lighting coming from this lamp inside here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if I can't see this guy, maybe I'll have to go into wireframe, which I currently can't see this lamp. I'm going to change this to wireframe. I can zoom in, there's my lamp. I'm going to adjust a couple of properties down here on the sampling. This will make my shadows a little bit softer, a little bit more accurate. Because right now there's only one sample. So when it hits geometry, that's it. Cuts it off, which is why we have those really, really defined shadows in there. So what I'm going to do here, this soft size is actually the size of the light source. You can change how big it is. Right now it's saying it's 1 unit, which if we were in actual real world measuring terms, that's pretty monstrous. Remember, one generic unit here is about 1 meter, so we have very large light bulbs apparently. We want to take that down a little bit. Maybe I could say like 0.1 or something like that. Maybe 0.2. Just to put something smaller. Just basically so the light source isn't bigger than the light shade there itself. That would be not good. And I'm going to take my samples up a little bit, probably about 6. I wouldn't go much higher than that. Unless you're not going to be busy for the next couple of weeks. Because upping samples does take up a lot of processing power. Here is the difference. Here I have both of these guys up from my original render and then with the ambient light on. So you can see quite a bit of difference. So there we go. Now I got really soft shadows down here. See now this feathers out. The light coming off the table here. You can't really see this edge anymore, but we can still see the illumination over here.
That's what it is, like extra intel, manager effort, manager for rendering. And And it costs more.
And for the remainder of the time here, and I'll show you guys some animation stuff if you want to, but that's probably a little bit beyond what we want to do here, probably anyway. For just getting into basics, it's much like going to ask your mechanic how a car works and asking him to explain it to you in a few sentences. So we're going to talk about the materials and texture system here. This is pretty easy now too, which it wasn't before. You remember Blender's texture system in 249 was very difficult. This is a whole lot more intuitive and a lot easier to work with. So materials. We have some really nice lighting set up here. I'm pretty happy with this lighting scenario that I have. What I'm going to do here is set up materials. I'm just going to get in my camera view here because it's going to be a little bit easier to select things. This pretty much has everything in here that I need. And I'm going to start selecting objects and assigning materials to them. I'm going to start with the couch, and you can follow along here. I'm going to click on the couch, and it should highlight orange here. And then we're going to go to the Materials tab, which is this sphere over here with a little checker on it, kind of a faded checker. Make sure you're clicking the sphere with the checker on it and not the actual checkerboard. That's something else. And when we're talking about materials, there's really only a couple things you have to worry about, the basic things. Diffuse and specular, which is basically what color things are. And that's these big boxes here. You know, so you click on it, you get a color selection box, change it to whatever you want. There's an intensity for each one of those, basically how bright those are going to be. How bright is the diffuse? How bright is the color, basically? How bright is the specular? How much light does it reflect? Like wall paint here, if you put really bright light on it, you see it has, you can see the light bouncing off the walls there from the actual interior lights, but it's not reflecting a lot of light. It's not like metal or chrome that's going to reflect a lot of light, so your intensity would be really low for like wall paint or something. So that's the kind of stuff you have to keep in mind. And there's also a hardness value. How smooth is the material? So what color, how much light reflects off of it, or how bright is it, and also how smooth is it. So those are your basic settings here. So I'm going to click on my couch. There's my preview. It's currently gray. So I can click on this box here under my diffuse, and I can change this, I'm going to make this guy red. Why not? The only other thing that I can do is change the intensity of the specular. You see, if I change the intensity of the specular, it reflects a lot more light. So as light hits it, it's going to bounce it back, and basically these are highlights. How bright are the highlights on there? And also, then we can change the glossiness value or hardness value, basically how smooth is that surface. So the smoother it is, then the higher this number is going to be. You can really think of this value here, like 100, being really, really smooth. So obviously, unless I have a patent leather couch, we're not looking at something like this, which I don't recommend, by the way. Especially if you live in a humid climate. So what we're going to do, I'm going to turn down my intensity really, really low. And if you think about it, fabric is not very smooth. It's very, very porous. So my hardness value goes way down too. I got it down to like 9 or 10.